how much or not they will try to distance themselves from Justin Trudeau, who, of course, is very unpopular, and announced his resignation earlier this week. Started off very popular, though, didn't he? Let's bring in Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Likewise. Thanks, Todd.
All right. So your thoughts on how this is going to play out here, because it is pretty tricky. On the one hand, you got a number of these candidates who have been really core to the Trudeau government, in some cases from the very beginning. Now, there will no doubt be some of them trying to distance themselves from that as well. Your organization is saying one clear way to do that is to get rid of the carbon tax.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to see this play out in a really fast and furious way. So they've got a few weeks to pick a new Liberal leader, and then they all get to sit down in Parliament again on March 24th. A week later, Todd, they're supposed to crank up the carbon tax. It's set to go up again on April 1st. So the carbon tax is really unpopular. A poll last year, just before the last hike, said 70% of Canadians were opposed to that. Imagine hitting the campaign trail as the brand new Liberal leader. Knock, knock, who's there? Carbon tax hike. Can I have your vote? That's not going to go over great. So we're expecting a lot of Liberal leadership candidates to declare that they are now too opposed to the carbon tax. How they distance themselves from it, though, with a lot of credibility is another question.
Well, it is interesting, too, because, you've got the slogan that Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, has been using, a carbon tax carney. We know that Chrystia Freeland, of course, was front and center in the carbon tax. We know that even the former Premier of British Columbia, Christy Clark, has been in favor of the carbon tax. So, it becomes a little difficult to walk that sort of thing back. Do you actually think that we might see one of the candidates here say, you know what, now is not the time for more taxes? We may agree with the idea of taxing carbon, but not right now.
Yeah, I do. I think that there's going to be a few prominent candidates that are going to have to do a 180. And hey, they won't be the first politician to turn around and do a 180 or a flip-flop on a key issue. So they're going to have to, one, differentiate themselves in the pack, and two, stop doing something that is crazily unpopular. And we have to keep in mind just how much this is costing people. After the hike on April 1st, the carbon tax is going to cost the minivan fill-up $15 extra every time. Filling up a pickup truck is $25 extra. And even if you don't drive, a trucker who's filling up their big rig with diesel, that's $250 extra just in this one carbon tax. So that's what's helping make everything more expensive. Remember, the Trucking Alliance came out a little while ago and said last year this one tax cost us $2 billion. So yeah, I'd be surprised if it isn't the end of this week before we see a Liberal leadership candidate say, you know what, we've tried this, it's failed, it's way too expensive, we're not doing it anymore.
We know so far anyway, the official policy is to continue with the carbon tax. As you point out, on April 1st, it will go up again. That timing is kind of tricky, isn't it, politically, for any of these people, because, you just play it out here. There's going to be a leadership race. By the end of March, Parliament will be back in session. There'll likely be a new Liberal leader who will effectively become Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau will be out. And then a week later, the carbon tax gets the increase. So, and then we're going to be likely in an election by May.
Wild, eh? Imagine kicking off your first campaign to be elected prime minister on a huge tax hike. That is wildly unpopular. So this is why we're saying, okay, folks, game's over. Come out right now and say, we too want to scrap the carbon tax. And it's not too late. I will point out that way back in ancient history, the British Columbia NDP were railing against the BC Liberal government, which was eventually taken over by Premier Christy Clark. And their campaign against the tax in BC was Axe the Tax. They called the carbon tax lipstick on a pig back then. And the late NDP leader, Jack Layton, was also opposed to the carbon tax. So we've seen stranger things.
Hey, Chris, it's good to see you again. Thanks for taking a little bit of time for CTV. We'll see how this one plays out. No doubt we'll talk again in the weeks ahead.
You bet.
Chris Sims with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. She's the Alberta Director, joining us from Lethbridge.